Geopolitics and Empire is joined by Artyom Lukin, who is an IR scholar, associate professor, and deputy director for research at the School of Regional and International Studies at Far Eastern Federal University in Vladivostok. He's one of my top Russian experts to follow on Twitter. Thank you for joining the podcast, Artyom. How are things way out there in the Far East?
Well, things are not very good, but not very bad either. I think it's pretty much like everywhere else in the world. And, this summer in Vladivostok has been remarkable because of the weather. Actually, we had a few weeks of extremely hot weather, which the people here had never experienced. So I think this is something which makes people in Russia, in the Russian Far East as well, realize that climate change is for real. So even though you introduced me as an international relations scholar, which I am for sure, but lately I have been interested more and more in climate change. So maybe I will be transiting into the area which I myself call as the geopolitics of climate change. This is a subfield of international relations which does not yet exist, but I think it will become a new field of international relations studies and political science in general pretty soon. So yeah, again, and even today, even though it's one of the last days of summer in Vladivostok, and towards the end of summer we tend to have cooler weather, but still it's quite hot, quite humid. So yeah, I think it's apart from the COVID, it's one of the main impressions of this year, at least here in Vladivostok and in the Russian Far East. And you know that not in Vladivostok, not in the Russian Far East, but kind of in eastern Siberia, we have had huge wildfires in the Republic of Yakutia. Fortunately, the wildfires have been put out already, but they were raging for like a month or even more. So that's another alarming sign that climate change is real and it's already impacting Russia. But again, I think that for Russia, it may have not only negative but also positive effects. So I'm sorry for for getting astray, but this is really something that I'm thinking a lot these days. Yeah.
So my guests are having a tendency to answer some of my last questions first. So this was one of my questions later on. What's pressing on your mind? And I think we could save this perhaps for a subsequent interview. So I had no idea of your interest on climate change. So perhaps in a further interview we can discuss that. I know here where I am in Mexico, it's always warm. So Professor Lukin, one of my first questions was I wanted to get kind of your big picture, because you talk a lot about Russia, China, the U.S., geopolitics, foreign policy, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on the decline of American hegemony as you see it. We're seeing what's happening now in Afghanistan and elsewhere. So and then we can drill down from there, looking at China and Russia. So where do you see America today?
Well, Frankly, I'm a little bored speaking about America and the decline of American hegemony. I think, well, that's something which is quite clear to almost everyone. So I don't think I could add anything new and original here. Of course, it's there is little doubt that America's hegemony is on the wane. The question is what is going to replace America's hegemony. Well, my sense is that we are entering a period of bipolarity again. This time, of course, it will be a bipolarity made up of the US and China. And, you know, I think it will come sooner than most analysts expected, maybe. But by the way, well, I remember actually one of my favorite books on international politics is written by Muthia Alagappa, who is a Malaysian international relations scholar, and 20 years ago, he edited a volume on Asian security. So it was published like in 2003. And what he predicted in this book was that American hegemony was going to last for at least 20-25 years. And now I find this prediction, you know, very true, because it has been 20 years since the year 2000, when we observed the peak of American hegemony. So 2 decades have passed, and now we can clearly see that the American dominance is beginning to crack. Actually, some analysts they got it right. The problem is that the time has passed so fast, almost imperceptibly, that you know, we have not almost noticed. So that's the problem. In fact, 20-25 years is a lot of time in modern era, and you know, psychologically, you know, it's kind of it's understandable how people back in 2000, even very clever analysts, they argued that American hegemony may last for another 20-25 years, but after that, it's kind of uncertain. But when people back then, when they read such stuff and when they saw 20-25 years, it sounded like almost forever, you know. But this was not forever, and now this 20-25 years, they have ended. So what seemed like forever back in 2000, now it's over. So I'm sorry for this rambling, you know, monologue, but my point is that nothing is forever. So American hegemony was very powerful thing, and it remains. So actually, I wouldn't underestimate the resilience of the United States, its power and its determination to stay at the top. But again, changes are always happening. So whether you like it or not, China has become the second pole in the global geopolitical order. So the question is for how long this bipolarity would persist, and whether it's going to be a long time phenomenon, which will last for many decades, or even a century, or even more than a century, or if this bipolarity going to be just a relatively short-lived phenomenon, which will be replaced by some other kind of geopolitical order, maybe multipolarity, with India, for example, joining the ranks of superpowers, or I don't know, Brazil or some other players, or whether we are going to see some kind of, some new edition of medieval ages with a great number of very diverse players. So that's a question which is impossible to answer with certainty right now. But my prediction would be that this new bipolarity is quite sustainable, is going to be quite sustainable, and I think it will last at least until the second half of the 21st century. Yeah. So China and the US at the top, and for Russia, for my own country, the question is how Russia is going to adjust, to adapt to this new order, whether Russia will stay as an completely independent player, albeit not at the top tier, but at least at the second tier of geopolitical players, just one notch down the US and China, or whether Russia is going to become a junior partner to China, or maybe to the West, because I believe that even though Russia's relations with the West are terrible right now, but in principle, they might get better, they might recover, not now, but 10 or 15 years from now, I wouldn't rule it out. So Russia could become a partner of the West against China. It's not very likely, but that's one possible scenario at least. So yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, another analyst that I know who you're talking about, but I can't pronounce his name. But I've had on Johan Galtung a few times, and he accurately predicted, I believe, 1980 that the Soviet Union would collapse by 1990. And he has said that also he thought U.S. empire would collapse by 2020, 2025.
Really? Interesting. Yeah.
So you see a number of independent minds thinking on the same frequency. I love your writing, by the way. I just wanted to cite some of it. That's why I follow your Twitter feed. I think you have very succinct insights, and I thought this was a hilarious and genius line in a paper you wrote that people can find on ResearchGate. I'll include the link. Quote, Beijing can no longer hope that the Kremlin's shenanigans will distract Washington from dealing with China. The metaphorical eye of Sauron is now firmly on China. Beijing will either have to capitulate to the U.S., renouncing its superpower ambitions, or take a stand. If it chooses the latter, as seems most likely, it needs strong allies to withstand American pressure. End quote. So just to get your further thoughts on China, you mentioned this bipolarity, like new Cold War going forward for the next half century, which I agree is a possibility. What else is interesting for you regarding China? What type of superpower ambitions does it have? A lot of people say, historically, China has never gone far beyond its own borders. So what is most important for you when looking at China today?
Yeah. I think the biggest problem, the biggest difficulty with understanding China and trying to predict China's future course, China's future trajectory, is that China is absolutely non-transparent for outside observers. It's a complete black box, I would say. So no one, including the Russians, really understand what China wants or what China intends to do. On the one, I think one reason for this, black box phenomenon is that China's system of decision making is absolutely opaque. China being, of course, a party state autocracy. So the decisions are made by a very narrow group of people who make decisions in a very secretive way. So that's one problem. And another problem is that China's civilization is very peculiar. It's very different from European ways, or not only European ways, from Muslim ways and so on. So China is a civilization unto itself, and frankly, I don't know what China is up to. I'm not sure whether China wants global hegemony. So the US establishment is now almost convinced that China is determined to replace the US as the global, overlord. But maybe the US is just projecting its own, psychology, its own mindset on China. I'm not sure that China wants to become a new Sauron, so to speak. But having said that, who knows? Maybe they do want to become the global hegemon. We have no way to know. So when it comes to the US, when it comes to understanding the US intentions and the US behavior, everything is absolutely understandable and transparent. The US does not hide its desire to stay as the global dominant power. And this makes it easier for Russia to deal with the US because the Americans, so the Russians understand the Americans, and the Americans, I think they do understand Russia in general, more or less. But no one can understand China. So that's the problem, because if you don't understand someone, this results in suspicions, right? This results in fears. And these fears may not be, in fact, substantiated. They may not be justified, but we just tend to fear what we don't understand. So we are afraid of, aliens, for example. Maybe there are not even aliens out there, and even if the aliens exist, they might be completely peaceful, but we do fear them because it's something unknown to us. So China is like those aliens. So I think what we know about China is maybe just little more than we know about aliens from the space. So that's the biggest issue with China. And again, this is a problem not only for the US, but also for Russia. Even though Russia and China, even though they are strategic partners or almost allies, but of course, the Russians cannot fully understand China. And that's why we cannot fully trust them. So this is a very peculiar relationship between Russia and China. Yes, there is a real strategic partnership, almost alliance, but this alliance is not based on full trust. It's based on pure transactionalism. So I think this Russia-China alliance is okay for now and for the foreseeable future, but who knows what happens 20 years from now.
Yeah, well, that was one of my other questions, and I just wanted to cite from an article. So you wrote a piece for 9-Line, I believe, where you talked about Russia, the bear becoming, the dragon's strategic mercenary. Quote, in a nutshell, Russia could become a giant military contractor, a 21st century condottiero state, and a nuclear-armed one at that, a broke but still militarily strong and audacious country that does the bidding of a rich superpower for remuneration, which would be China, end quote. So just your thought then on how Russia is doing, where is Russia at right now? You said it would likely become a second tier between China and the US, but in general, and in the article, you kind of allude to China, Russia not having strong economy, but having its strong military. So what is important for us to know about Russia today?
Oh, well, this article that you quoted, actually, I make a reservation in the article that this scenario is highly hypothetical, so it's theoretically possible, but I don't think it's very likely. But the reason I write about such scenarios is that you should be prepared for almost, anything. So I think the last 40 years in world politics have absolutely demonstrated that almost anything is possible. As someone who was born in the Soviet Union, who spent his childhood and teenage years as a Soviet citizen, and then almost overnight the Soviet Union collapsed, this, of course, this experience, makes you understand that everything is possible, and you should be prepared for almost infinite range of possibilities. So, speaking of Russia's future relationship with China, I think Russia would remain an independent player, even though Russia's economy is not in a very good shape, and it's unlikely that Russia's economy would get much better in the foreseeable future. But still, Russia's identity is based on this idea of maintaining sovereignty and independence, and we are not going to trade. We're not going, to let me reformulate it. Russia, as you know, has been adamant in resisting American hegemony, and of course, Chinese hegemony is no less acceptable for Russia than American one. So I don't think, again, that Russia is going to become China's junior partner or vassal or satellite, whatever you call it, in the foreseeable future, actually, Russia might become China's mercenary. Yeah, but mercenary is not the same as vassal. It's not the same as subordinate. So if Russia becomes China's mercenary, it will still remain an independent power. It will just provide some, services for China in exchange for, money, for example. So it will be based on pure transactionalism, and Russia will do it for as long as it profits. Russia will do it for as long as it profits itself. So even this mercenary scenario, it presupposes that Russia remains a strategically independent player. So my prediction is that for the next 20 years, Russia will certainly remain an independent strategic player, which retains enough power, enough geopolitical power to have a meaningful influence on global geopolitics. Yeah. What happens after that? What happens after 2040? It's anyone's guess. So I'm not daring enough to predict what's going to happen in 2050, for example. Mm-hmm. But at least until 2040, I think Russia will stay as a major independent power, which may or may not be China's ally or partner, but it will be independent, strategically independent.
All right. I had another question, which I think was this topic was very important. You wrote a startling op-ed for RT claiming that an era of isolationism is coming to the world. I say startling because this is exactly what I was fearing, and hearing it from you kind of only further confirmed my own dreaded hypothesis. You wrote, quote, "During my recent visit to Moscow, one of Russia's best foreign policy experts said something that many of us are thinking but still reluctant to recognize. The world has entered an era of closed borders and restricted travel. This new age of isolationism will last years, maybe decades. It is the COVID-19 pandemic that has triggered the closure of borders, but the geopolitics of intensifying great power rivalry may be a more profound cause of this new reality." We were talking about this a bit before we started the interview, but we're seeing it's difficult to travel now internationally. Countries are locking down. They're introducing these kind of social credit system, vaccine passport measures, and it's become just this huge bureaucracy to attempt to travel anywhere now, between PCR tests, different kinds of PCR tests that are not accepted here. And so what's all this about, this era of isolationism?
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I have to say that maybe I was too pessimistic when I wrote this piece. Just to give you one positive example, here in Vladivostok at my Forest Federal University, we have just concluded a summer school for foreign students, which brought together students mostly from Europe, mostly from Germany, and even one girl from South Korea came. There were also students from Hungary and the UK. And actually, when I was contacted by the organizers of the school and asked to participate as a lecturer, I was shocked because I didn't expect this school to happen this year. And I think the fact that international events, physical international events like this summer school at our university, that they still continue to be held, it shows that people, especially young people, they have this irresistible urge to travel, and it is not so easy to prevent them from traveling. So maybe I was too pessimistic in my article, but still I stand by my conclusion that that the era of free global travel that we enjoyed for the last 25 years, it's over. It's over for now, and it's not only due to the coronavirus pandemic, but it's also due to the world, splitting into pretty much closed geopolitical blocks. And especially concerning is that big powers like China, they are, closing their borders. So look at China. So we already spoke a little bit about China, and now it's getting clear that China is trying to, to eject foreigners, to not only to limit the number of foreigners entering China, but also to try to make those foreigners that are still in China to leave the country. So it seems like Beijing, like the Chinese leadership, they're consciously trying to isolate China, and why is that? Maybe because they believe that China has already become self-sufficient, which is, I think, partly true. So when you have a small number of major countries who run the world, and those countries are entering self-isolation for various reasons, you get a world which is, much more restricted in travel opportunities. So I think that a kind of world we are entering right now, it will not be completely, closed and compartmentalized. It will be something in between. There will be, of course, opportunities to travel, but they will be relatively limited. And I think we have to adjust to this new reality. Maybe for people like you and me, it's okay because we have already had our share of international travel. But for youngsters, it will be sad. Yeah, but I do hope that at least Russia will stay open. And if you look at Russia's current border and travel policies, I think Russia remains one of the most open countries in the world in terms of international travel. So we allow, the Russian government allows Russians to travel abroad without any restrictions, and Russia allows foreigners to come from most countries. So I think in this particular dimension, Russia is probably one of the most liberal countries in the world right now. So that would be my response.
All right. Yeah. I think I was there 4 years ago in Russia, and it was a fantastic time. So we're kind of getting your snapshot from around the world on the US, China, Russia, this COVID isolationism. Just to get your quick thought on Europe, I think it was yesterday or today that you made a tweet on Europe saying that Europe may simply exchange American hegemony for Chinese hegemony. Someone on my Twitter feed that interacts with me, Victoria Topalova, disagreed and said that the current political situation in the EU points to Europe's complete dependence on transatlanticism. Most likely, she says, Europe may become China's partner only if Russia does this first and becomes a security guarantor for Europeans as well as a global geopolitical bridge. Where do you see the EU in between, America, Russia, and China?
Well, frankly, I'm not a big expert on Europe. But again, when I compare Russia and Europe, of course, it's striking that Russia is so adamant about its independence, whether in regard to the West or with regard to China. But Europe has for decades existed as an entity which is subordinate to someone else. So right now, Europe's someone who Europe is subordinate to right now, it's the US. And frankly, I don't think this tweet of mine was, of course, what was a little bit provocative. And I don't think that it's very likely that Europe would become China's satellite, but we can't rule it out either. So it may be implausible within the next few years. But again, what happens in 2040? So come 2040, what happens? How Europe would look like? And if China plays its cards right, if China acts wisely and smart on the global stage and towards Europe, who knows? Maybe Europe would decide that at least some key countries in Europe would decide that, well, why not become partners with China, And if China offers to Europe generous terms, Europe might accept it. So let me put it, straight. So the Europeans are very much addicted to their material prosperity, right? So the question is, which is more important to Europe? Money and prosperity, and or abstract freedom and abstract values. So I think this is a question that the Europeans may be afraid of asking themselves, because that's a very hard question, Of course, outwardly they say that, of course, values, have the highest priority, but I have my doubts when they have to choose between prosperity and values. And if it turns out that prosperity requires becoming a kind of junior partner to China, then who knows what choice Europe would make. But again, it's not going to happen right now, not in 5 years, but in 15, 20, 25 years, who knows?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question you bring up. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the key questions, whether Europeans want more, just material prosperity or the historic, values of liberty and freedom. And unfortunately, I feel it's tending away from the values of liberty and more towards prosperity, materialism.
So you would agree with my point, right?
Yeah, I can feel it. I can see it.
It's not impossible, right?
No, I think we can already see the beginning of a trend there. As you say, how it plays out, we'll have to see. I had another question about, maybe you're tired as well of this question, but perhaps for listeners, Vladimir Putin brings up a lot of mixed emotions. Some view him as a nationalistic patriot who revived Russia. Some Russians that I met in Russia said they don't like him personally, but they see him as the least worst option for the moment. Of course, you've got other Russians and foreigners who hate Putin and view him as some kind of Dr. Evil. At this stage in the game, in the year 2021, how do you see Vladimir Putin, and what would you tell us is most important to note about him? And by the way, I don't know if you have any comments. Paul Goebel, interesting analyst, has said Shoigu may potentially be lining up to replace Putin. So just your thoughts. What would be important for us outside of Russia to know about Putin?
Well, personally, I'm not a supporter of Putin. I think last time I voted for Putin in presidential elections was maybe in 2004. And I think it's not good to have the same, ruler for more than 20 years. So people at the helm, they should change, So my personal view is that the sooner Putin goes, the better. Yeah. But of course, Putin remains Russia's legitimate leader, and I may not like him personally, but a lot of Russians do support him. So I think he's unlikely to leave anytime soon, unless there is some major crisis happening in Russia, which would force him to go. And Putin has survived this COVID crisis, and last year, you may remember that when the pandemic started and the price of oil plunged, it looked like a perfect storm, which Putin might not be able to survive, but now it looks okay for him. But who knows what other perfect storms are in store for him, and I don't know. So it's difficult to predict for how long he will remain Russia's paramount leader. I think even if he formally retires and power is given to some successor, be it Shoigu or anyone else, I think still the Putin regime, the Putin state, as I prefer to call it, the Putin state will still remain in place, with Putin remaining as Deng Xiaoping, the informal paramount leader. And frankly, that's a very difficult question. I may not like Putin personally, but I do understand that for Putin and for the Putin state to go, it takes a huge crisis to hit Russia, And frankly, I don't want any crisis or revolutions or calamities hitting Russia. So it's something like that, yeah. And finally, I would like to say that even though I may not like Putin, but I do realize that Putin is inside me, because Putin reflects in a very big way reflects Russia's national psyche, Russia's, national mindset. So that's why he has been so successful, and that's why he has been so powerful, because he more or less reflects all the wishes and desires and instincts of the Russians, including myself. So yeah, that's complicated, and that's completely unpredictable. Russia's political trajectory, as history shows, is not predictable. So it may look like Russia's state is very strong, but then something happens, and the state is gone. Revolution happens, and their family of the ruling family is executed in a basement, in Yekaterinburg, even though just a few years earlier people adored Tsar Nicholas II and his family, and there was a surge of patriotism when the First World War started in 1914. But in 1918, just the Tsar and his family were killed by the Bolsheviks. So that gives you just one idea how unpredictable Russia is. So I would really refrain from making any predictions here. Frankly, I don't think that Shoigu is going to become Putin's successor, but even if he is, again, as I said, the Putin state will remain, and Putin will stay as the paramount leader. Yeah.
We have just some minutes left. In the context of what we've been talking about, I mean, I know you're in the Far East. You also write about a lot of other topics. You talk about North Korea. In the context of what we've been discussing, is there any other interesting topic, country, or issue that you want to bring up?
Yeah, as you said, I'm interested in the Korean Peninsula, maybe because Korea is very close geographically, and actually, if you come to Vladivostok and then you go to Korea, like places like Seoul or Busan or Pyongyang, you will see that it's the same region in terms of geography, in terms of terrain, in terms of weather, climate. So if you live and work here, you have to be interested in Korea. And actually, North Korea is a very interesting phenomenon. Again, as we just talked about Putin, Russia's political trajectory is unpredictable, and I think this is also true with regard to North Korea. Even though the North Korean regime, the Kim dynasty, looks, unshakable and very resilient, and it looks like it will stay forever, but I'm not sure. Actually, I would say that if tomorrow the North Korean regime if collapses, I will not be surprised at all. Do you know why? It's just because we don't know what the North Koreans think. They may wholeheartedly support and adore the Kim dynasty. It looks like it, but the question is what they really think and how they are going to behave when some shock comes, when some crisis comes. So again, North Korea is very unique, but I wouldn't be surprised if it disappears overnight next year, for example. So be prepared for it.
I would agree. Anything is possible. That's what Russians told me when I was in Russia, or when I was living in the former Soviet Union in Kazakhstan. They never imagined, the Soviet collapse. And I think similar thing in my parents' homeland of, Yugoslavia, where they came from. No one, everyone is shocked when these things happen. I guess since we started, myself as an American, we started talking about America, I thought maybe we could end, because you've written a few articles as well. On November 16th, you wrote of the possibility of civil war in the United States and how it could be averted through anti-China sentiment. Later on January 5th, I mean, that's quite the timing, right? Right before January 6th, you wrote, quote, "Despite talk of an impending civil war in the U.S., I don't believe it will happen. Fear of violence and chaos in mature societies has become sufficient to prevent domestic conflicts breaking out." End quote. What are your thoughts for America on the road ahead?
Well, I think, again, it's too early to dismiss America, as some people do, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for the U.S. By the way, and I don't think that America is going to descend into civil war and go the way of the Soviet Union. Actually, it's interesting that quite a few people in Russia, they tend to believe that, or pretend to believe that America is another Soviet Union. For example, the head of Russia's foreign intelligence, Sergei Naryshkin, a few months ago, he said that America looks like the late Soviet Union, destined for crisis or maybe even collapse. I don't agree with such assessments. I think that the Biden administration has been quite successful, in my view, even though there was a lot of mockery in Russia about Biden, about his, old age, his, senility, supposed senility. But if you look at what's happening in the States, I think post-Trump, the United States has been doing quite good, both domestically and in geopolitics too. Yes, there is this failure in Afghanistan, but this failure, it was predetermined long time ago, much earlier than Biden came to the White House. And I think that Biden made an absolutely right decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. So I think we can in the next few decades, we can enjoy a very interesting, spectacle of the U.S. and China competing with each other, and I don't think who is going to win this competition. But again, I wouldn't dismiss the U.S. and right now, I think America's odds for winning, they still look better than China's. Yeah.
And I would agree as well. For the longest time, I have been more of the mindset of the decline of U.S. empire. One of the first people I've interviewed on this podcast was cultural historian Morris Berman, who's written a trilogy on the decline of American empire. But I'm surprised to see the resiliency, as you said, of America. It's there. It's quite resilient. And actually, I hope America continues being resilient. I think we'll leave it there. You're
yeah,
on.
and one more thing I would like to add about America. America's. I'm not original, of course, in this statement, but America is an open system. So unlike China, which, as we just discussed, which has been entering this self-isolation mode, America's, I think, still remains very much open. And the Americans, the US establishment, they do understand, and the American people in general, I think they do understand that America's openness is something that gives it a lot of strength. So I think it gives America an edge in this unfolding competition with China.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as you say, it's going to be a very interesting coming few years and decades. You are on Twitter at Artyom Lukin. Is there any other website or project we should know about?
Well, I think Twitter is my primary platform for my English-speaking audience. So I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right. I can't recommend Artyom's work and his profound insights. I guess for us, the place to go is Twitter. And do follow him. And spasiba for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Yeah, thank you, Hue, for having me here today. And I would be happy to talk to you in future, maybe, in 25 years, Yeah, maybe sooner, hopefully sooner, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast interview. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list through which you can receive an update of every new podcast, as well as a long list of key news headlines once a week. We're being heavily censored. YouTube has deleted some of our videos, and we currently have one strike. Patreon has terminated our account. Facebook has restricted our page, and Reddit has been deleting posts. Our favorite social media channels are Telegram and Twitter. The best places to watch the podcast beyond YouTube are on Odyssey, BitChute, and Brighteon. The best places to listen to the podcast are on SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, Google, or on any other podcast app. To help keep this podcast alive, leave a review on Apple Podcasts and wherever else. Subscribe to all our platforms and leave a donation if possible via Subscribestar, PayPal, Bitcoin, or Ethereum. You can also find us on MeWe, Minds, Gab, Float, VK, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.